live, and we hope that you are all out there. I'm not April Foreman. That might come as a surprise to some of you. That's Tracy Medeiros waving in the background. She's our comic relief for the next 6 months. Also is going to be doing a lot of retweeting. And Tracy, why don't you introduce yourself and I'll go last.
What do you mean? You already did it for me.
Okay, no, let's.
Hi, I'm Tracy Medeiros, everybody. I'm a suicide attempt survivor and author and anything else that you want to call me, but don't call me late for dinner.
There you go. Rick, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Rick Strait. I'm in Missouri, in the middle of the country. Suicide prevention advocate, attempt survivor, and impacted family and friend.
Cool beans.
Cool.
And that's what tonight's about, everyone. So as a kickoff, this may be a little unusual if you're very accustomed to the SPSM chat. And first of all, we are so glad to have you all here. And as you're checking in, if you could all just let us know your name, your connection to suicidology, where you are in the country. That would be cool as the feed goes in. It's not common necessarily for the person hosting it to be really flapping their jaws all that much, but this is a double edge for us here. The topic is impacted family and friends. And when we're talking impacted, we're referring to initially, historically, when we started working with this project in 2013, it was families impacted by a loved one who was a suicide attempt survivor, emotionally impacted by that crisis. And we have expanded that over the last few years. My name is Annemarie Matulis. I am the chairperson for the Impacted Family and Friends Committee for the American Association of Suicidology, a relatively new committee. I'm kind of like a bad penny. I keep showing up and raising my hand and saying, Impacted Family and Friends, and Dr. Julie Sarrell, president of AAS, at the membership meeting in April in Washington said, yes, Annemarie. And as soon as someone says, yes, Annemarie, I know you've raised your hand probably one time too many. But the end result was in the summertime, a committee was formed. I feel honored and kind of humbled to be appointed as the chair. And Tony Wood is my co-chair. And we have about 35 members right now. So much of what we're going to be talking about off and on tonight is all around the impacted family and friends, not just the committee. So who qualifies as an impacted family member? Quite honestly, just about anybody. So there are the parents, the siblings. In some cases, I've sat and talked with adult children who still have a parent or a sibling who's in crisis. It isn't just about parents with young adolescents and teens. And it isn't just about suicide attempt survivors. It could be any form of suicidal crisis or experience, non-suicidal self-injury, chronic suicidal thinking. I don't know if Frank King is out there tonight. If he is, I hope he'll chime in about his experience with that. Eating disorders that lead to depression and suicidal ideation, if not an attempt. And most recently, in the past year anyway, the group that joined us have been loss survivors for a couple of reasons. And Lena, if you're out there, you could probably chime in a little bit about that too, and share your experience with that. Because what has happened for a lot of loss survivors, that I don't know, nobody ever talked about it before, but they discovered that they were falling into the trap that can paralyze some of us who have a loved one who's an attempt survivor, and that is they start missing the difference between love and control. Control does not equal love. It's one of the exercises we use in our workshops, the 20 questions, where you're going, who you're going out with, and it's all fear-based. That is there the potential for a suicide attempt, and for loss survivors, the paralyzing terror of, could I possibly lose someone else? We base this on the axiom that I know so many of you use in your work probably, or have heard at least, and that is the oxygen axiom. None of us pay attention to those airline stewardesses when they're telling us what to be doing if those masks come down, but it has to go on me first. I'm of no value to an attempt survivor. And by the way, Tracy is my affectionately attempt survivor. I'm of no value if I haven't taken care of myself first. So the work around hashtag impacted family is all about self-care first. So then we can be of value and support and help for our loved ones. And I'll stop there with that. And Rick and I met with Rick Tracy and I met in Phoenix at AAS. We were stuffing bags for the conference. And if you've ever had the pleasure of stuffing 1,400 bags with little pieces of information, walking around a table to get your steps, you really should try it if you're going to Denver. You meet some very interesting people there. And that's where Tracy and I met Rick. And Rick, I know I've sent out a link. There'll be a link coming out about the blog. Dad, do you have a minute? And I wonder if you could pick up there and talk about a little bit about your background, your story, and why you are here with us tonight.
All right. So I mentioned earlier, I am a suicide attempt survivor. I had kept that quiet from about 1993 up till about 2006, 2007. And kind of kept it to myself. I was kind of started working in the area of suicide prevention. Then I realized that I need to talk about it. I started talking about it. I became very open in talking about suicide prevention with my family, my friends, coworkers. And one of those individuals in my family I shared it with was my son, Holden, which you guys got to meet when we were in Phoenix because they were voluntold to stuff bags as well. Both my boys were. And the reason he was actually with me was because just a month prior, he had called me, and it was what the blog is about. He had called me, and we'd had many discussions about suicide and that I'd been there before, and wanting them to reach out if they ever felt like they were contemplating suicide. He called me to let me know he was having those thoughts and feelings and that he was planning on acting on them. And without going and reading the whole blog, we had a conversation while I was able to get home and make sure he was safe. You know, as somebody that works in the area of suicidology, I kind of know what the best practice is. But when it's my son, I was ready to overreact, but I was able to stay calm and react appropriately. And I do believe that he is here because I had that conversation about my lived experience. I also know it's not a guarantee for the future. He still struggles, and that's kind of where my impacted family part continues because he still struggles with suicidal thoughts. And I have found that there's a lot of people that are struggling as family members. And as a mental health professional, and I talk to Tracy about this, I know we get people all the time. They're asking, how do they cope? What can they do to, for themselves? How do they handle all the things that are going on for them? And so I thought it was a really natural fit, and actually had Annemarie and Tracy come out to Missouri to our conference last year, and we kind of have a spinoff of what they're doing in Massachusetts, getting going in Missouri.
Yeah, we do. So to let you all know, what happened is that we went out and did after the keynotes on the Southeastern Missouri Conference, we did an all-day training on 2 of the projects that we had developed in Southeastern Massachusetts. And let me pause right there, because that's one of the things I hope will come out of tonight. If you haven't seen it yet, a tweet will be coming out to ask you, what resources do you have? Because we don't know if we have, I've certainly searched, but we certainly haven't found resources specific to suicide. NAMI has a wonderful program for families. Perry Hoffman with borderline personality disorder, the education program that she has, the foundation she has, they have a family component too. And I believe just now starting to add suicide to that. But other than that, there are a lot of support for mental health and for family, but we could not find others that were specific to those who are impacted by a suicidal experience and a suicidal crisis. So when Tracy and I went out to Missouri in July, that was what the training was all about. We spent all day training a whole group of people out there to deliver one or two or both of our projects that we have, because we kind of take a holistic picture to this. There are many levels to this whole new process that we're starting to work with. And the Missouri connection, Rick is so right. We've had Massachusetts, southeastern Massachusetts is where Tracy and I are, and we developed these programs back in 2013, the beginning of 2014, when we had just finished production for a documentary that kind of started this whole thing. The documentary is called A Voice at the Table, and it was a call to action because Tracy had been, I've been working with Tracy as a mentor, a second mom for 20 years. And still right in front of my eyes, did not realize the depth of value we had in an attempt survivor until I heard another attempt survivor speak. And so we pulled together four, and what a wonderful crew it was looking back now. So I don't know if Desiree's out there, but we had Desiree Stage, we had Cara Anna, who used to do a blog for attempt survivors on the AAS website, and then Craig Miller and Tracy. So four very different people had very different experiences. But what they had in common was, as they were trying to heal after the immediate crisis, when they were trying to heal on with their life, there were no resources out there, not a peer-to-peer setting, not self-care, nothing, even there were not even many clinical options available for them. And so we sat there, and I said to Tracy one night, I said, well, that sucks. That's not good. And so the film prompted us to start to develop a wellness check exercise grouping, and we called it it had a horrible name in the beginning. It was a wellness check workshop for attempt survivors, and it went on and on and on, and you could even make a good acronym out of it. And so I asked Tracy to help me with that, and she initially said no. She usually does say no when I ask. And then she realized the most important ingredient. I was trying to develop this for attempt survivors, and I'm not an attempt survivor. So she settled in and helped me with that project. And that's what came out of that. And it was just a month later when, as we were in post-production and doing the final editing on that video, that I sat there and I said, there's nothing for family. I'm blessed that I had a solid foundation emotionally at the time that we were doing this film, but I started to think back of what it would be like to be that frightened, and that brought me back to my lived experience began with domestic violence. I've been in public health for about 35 years, and I started with domestic violence. And so to write the curriculum for impacted families, I drew back on that and kind of relived some of that to remember how paralyzed by fear I could be. And in talking to families of attempt survivors at the time, I heard that same fear. And I went, well, we got to do something about that. And that's where Is This the Night came out. And that was the title of the workshop series we do. That is this the night? Is this the night he dies? Is this the night they overdose? Is this the night? Is this the night? But the second half of the title is Finding Inner Peace. And I go back to the oxygen axiom. If I don't take care of myself first, if I allow myself to get emotionally down, physically down, spiritually down, I'm of no value to Tracy to help her as a mentor, as a second mom. And if you had seen me this afternoon, you would see how easily that can go.
She was a basket case.
Yeah, there was just some stuff going on. I said, I can't find out how to do this, and thank God they're both out there hovering and holding up the safety net underneath us. But For those of you who missed Doc Foreman, she is here. Her spirit is here. She's on Twitter. She's listening. She's watching, and she's sending me notes to make sure that this all works out well. So that's a little bit of the history of that. And I did mention that workshop for attempt survivors, and that has evolved. And that evolved by accident. It was no one's great idea at the time, but now it has become a passion of Tracy's. We refer to it as the Re-Energize and Reconnect Wellness Check Workshop, but we also call it Blended Hearts. So Trace, you want to talk about why this became so important? You might want to start with meeting Rosie.
Yeah. Well, when I met Rosie, she was telling her story about her loss about her son, and I really, I really took that story to heart, and I felt like that. I felt like she was like talking to me, you know. And right at that point, being a suicide attempt survivor, when I felt like she was talking to me, I couldn't believe the things she was saying and how impacted she was by the loss and her grief. And although my heart goes out to her, that she actually saved my life. It was real important to hear that, to hear, you know, that I wouldn't have been a burden, and that no, like my family would have been heartbroken if I had died, you know. So, you know, and my friends, the friends that I had, you know, and I think that was the very first time I actually came out and actually said that I tried suicide, and, you know, but then I wanted to move forward with that, and I wanted to live life to the fullest, especially, you know, after I started hearing more and more loss survivors. I started to think that, you know, if some of us who are attempt survivors kept listening to loss survivors and hearing their loss, and realized that, you know, well, gee, we're really not a burden, you know, to the people around us, and that it's, you know, that it's a fleeting thought that we get. Sometimes I feel I feel like that keeps me out of my depression, because I think of people around me and how much it would hurt the other people around, you know, even though I may sometimes still feel the same way and I get like depressed, but I just keep all those stories that I hear in my head from everyone, you know, not just from Rosie's story, but, you know, from everybody, you know, that I've ever heard. And, you know, and I keep that with me. And now I dedicate my life to helping other attempt survivors see that, you know, no, you're not going to be a burden. You know what I mean? Like, there's people out there that care, and that if you just have that one glimmer of hope, you know, that's all you need. You know, that's all you need. Anything else?
Nope, that would be good. Rick, anything you want to add to that aspect of it?
No, I mean, just through some of the work with AFSP, when I was working with the walks and getting them lost survivors had similar impact. I was probably a little further along in my lived experience by the time I got to meet those individuals. But I think that collaboration of lived experience and lost survivors is very important in getting to help educate each other. Because I did have, I guess, I'll take it back. I had a little bit of guilt, I think, at times when I first started working with lost survivors.
Yep.
Because I survived and their family members did not.
Didn't. Yep.
So I think that was a very useful and learning time for me, and a healing time for me as well.
Okay. Yeah, and Lena, I just saw your it was about 8 minutes ago. I don't know if you're still there. Yes, this will be recorded. And then we'll have a wakelet out there after we come off the chat. Tony and April are going to walk me through that. So we keep a wakelet and save that. So going back to what Tracy said, and this all relates to the impacted family and friends. That when we started, we worked separately. So we would have one room where we would have impacted family members coming for little workshops. And then in another room, there might be attempt survivors, and then another room, lost survivors. And by accident one night, it was a grief support night, and we had already done the basic check-ins and introduction, and Tracy kind of stuck her head in the door. She had been home from chemotherapy, and she just stuck her head in the door to say hi, and she got invited in because she knew most of the people at the table. And this is how these things evolve. You know, when you look at a comprehensive packet that we have now, these were how the pieces came together. And sometimes I write curriculum. I'm an author. I'm a grant writer, and you can plan a lot of things and plot it all out. But I'm convinced the older I get, and I am old, the older I get, that sometimes the best things that happened are serendipitous. That it wasn't anybody's great idea. And we were sitting at the table, and Tracy sat down, and one of our lost survivors asked her to share a little bit about her story, a particular piece of it. And so she started sharing, and sitting to the left of Tracy is someone you're going to meet in 2 weeks, Steve Palm. And Steve and his wife, Carrie, lost their daughter, Casey, when she was 14. And it's coming up on 5 years now. And Tracy shared what it was like in those darkest moments, like there were blinders on, and she could not see, feel, or hear much of anything else except the inner pain. And then she very quietly said, it was no one's fault. And it was like you could physically see a change in Steve as he sat there. And he said at the time he felt like concrete blocks had just been lifted off of his shoulders. And he started to cry, not in sorrow, just in a sense of a relief to have heard Tracy say that and share that. And so that has evolved now into what we call blended hearts. And it's a very important piece of our impacted family approach, that it isn't just talking about the parents, people like me, or the attempt survivors over there and the lost survivors over there. It's about wrapping this around the entire family unit and everybody who gets impacted by either losing someone or fear for someone who's at risk. Doesn't matter. And so we ended up calling it Blended Hearts, because that's really what it turned out to be. And we were blessed to be able to present that at our state conference in Massachusetts this past April, for the plenary session. And people were amazed, because I need to share with you that when we first said that we had attempt survivors and lost survivors at the same table, we got a lot of pushback. Well, you can't do that. And I said, why not? And so we just kept doing what we were doing. And as a result, that's how the Re-Energize and Reconnect Wellness Check workshops came about. Rather than sitting in separate rooms, everybody sits together now. We still have, by the way, in case anything out there is concerned, we still have the grief support. That's an important piece. And sadly, we have all too many more recent loss survivors at our table right now. They gravitate on their own volition. We don't say you can't go in there to the other room. We don't say it has to be at this point. Everybody knows there's self-knowledge there, and they know that they're ready now to move on to the next step. And the next step is the healing process that is so extremely important. So I'm looking to all the people. Trace, have there been any tweets that?
Yep.
Right.
Marshall has tweeted about he wanted more information about the impacted family and friends.
More information as how to do something with it?
I'm not sure. He just said that he'd like more information on it.
Okay. So
I made sure that I let him know. I did let him know that that we'd get more information out to him.
Okay. All right. So Marshall, yeah, you and I had been a little bit in touch on Twitter about this. So let me use Missouri as the model. because they are a great model right now. I feel like Johnny Appleseed spreading little pilot programs all over the place. Um, so that what has happened is right now, literally this week, we have two programs running in Missouri. One is in Joplin, and the other will be in Jackson. And the one in Joplin is Jackie Christmas. Uh, Rick, is Jackie on the tweet? Is she on the feed?
I know
I
she
didn't.
was planning on it. I don't know for sure if she is or not.
I haven't seen her tweet in. By
Okay,
the way,
is Heather out there?
Heather is out there, yes. She's
Okay.
having some technical difficulties, though.
Okay, well, we did just before we came on. We were Rick and Tracy and I were just chatting away, and we were joking about the countdown, and all of a sudden we lost the internet connection. And I went, "That's really not funny." But Marshall, to tell you what's happening in those two, they're two different programs. So Jackie Christmas under the Department of Mental Health in Missouri, by the way, yay for you guys who are sponsoring this. They're doing the re-energize and reconnect. So they're doing the wellness workshop for the attempt and loss survivors together. The other group that's in Jackson, Sheila Gray and Sarah Hester are doing the Is This the Night Finding Inner Peace. And here's how it works. There's a workbook that has about a dozen exercises in it. The exercises are, it starts with an introduction saying that perfection is not an asset. Because we were the caregivers, and if we're not perfect, why would we expect a loved one who's in suicidal crisis to be perfect? That twist that can happen, especially with family, that can be so difficult. And then we work people into there's a frozen in time. And so if people out there can identify with this, and you're a loss survivor, not just the family of someone who's in a suicidal attempt crisis or suicidal thinking or non-suicidal self-injury or all the other iterations that can be out there with this. Frozen in time is when after you come out of that emergency department or someone is discharged perhaps from a psych unit. Well, here are the questions we got. Here's the questions I got from people. Do I quit my job? I have a vacation scheduled in 6 months. Should I cancel it now? Should I have a daytime caregiver come in because I have to go to work? We've had parents who say they listen at the door to make sure that their loved one is still breathing. And that's whether it's a child or an adult. So the whole frozen in time piece is super important to talk about those fears. There's no easy answer, by the way, to any of those questions. There's no right or wrong answer on that. If you've been impacted with the nightmare of not my kid, hashtag not my kid, whether the kid is an adult or not my sister, not my niece. Sadly, we know that suicide ideation and suicidal thinking can reach out and touch anyone. But I still go back on what John Draper says all the time. Suicidal thinking does not a suicide make. And we have to normalize the conversation. So, Marshall, that would be two of the kinds of exercises. We talk about how do you distract yourself under stress. So what we do is we put coloring down in front of everybody or doodle pads. And if that doesn't work, because we've had people flat out say, I'm not going to color. And of course, now they are the first ones at the table with the coloring, the Sharpies. Steve, not mentioning anyone in particular. And we need to find out, well, what distracts you? And some people will say, well, I go to the gym, or I take the dogs for a walk down at the state park. Because people sometimes lose sight when they're in crisis. They sometimes lose sight that they might have a tool right in front of them already that they could use. You don't have to reinvent. This is not about reinventing the wheel. Marshall, the workbook exercises are a blend of cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, 12-step modality, common sense. But what has to happen is we have to be honest about the conversation. Anger. Is it okay to be angry with someone who has just attempted suicide? One of the things that's important is to recognize you're angry because you were frightened. You're not angry at that individual, hopefully. And Tracy will tell you that the hardest one in either of the two workshop series is the F word. Um, yeah, not that one. Forgiveness. Um, First and foremost, for parents, for families, or for the close friends of a loved one who's been in a suicidal crisis or been frightened to death by someone's suicidal crisis, you have to forgive yourself for being human, and not being perfect and not knowing. And then it's there's a whole litany that we give, like you have to learn to let go, because if not, you're going to end up with a hit list, and that kind of resentful attitude will bring no good to anybody. And it might be the caregivers, the medical and psychiatric caregivers that are on that hit list, or your family members for not recognizing how important this was. um, so we do a whole series with the impacted family. And we're going to be talking more about that. You're going to get to meet some of the other people on the AAS Impacted Family and Friends Committee, because they'll be presenting. Next week's topics are, and Jess, if you're out there, please correct me if I don't get this right. It's social justice. What is it, and what is it not? Um, with probably a spin on racial equity. The week after that, Tracy and Steve, whom I've already mentioned, and our friend Kathy, who is also a loss survivor, are going to talk to you a lot more in depth about the benefits, and the rationale between bringing attempt and loss survivors to the same wellness check table. And we'll be going on with another list of things. What else you got out there for tweets? Anybody?
Yeah, Heather's here.
Heather's here.
I've already said hello to her.
Okay.
Jackie Christmas showed up. She's here.
Okay. But any questions that we're missing?
Just Amber Cannon.
Yep.
I'm just trying to answer her right now. She wanted to know, so how do you talk to a family survivor and be an attempt survivor? What is the best approach, and or is it just to be honest with them? So I was just replying to her at this point.
Can you
repeat it?
Yeah, please.
She wanted to know, how do you talk to a family survivor? What's the best approach?
Are we talking a loss survivor or attempt survivor?
I'm thinking an attempt survivor, because that's how she ended the question.
Okay. Rick, that would be right up your alley.
Yep. So I was replying to her as we're speaking right now. I was just trying to fill in all the hashtags.
Okay. So Rick, I somewhere out on the feed is the link to your blog to Holden. But one of the things that you shared with me that I thought was so important, because I never hear anybody else talking about that. I mean that. I mean, back in the day, now everybody, I'm old, so I'm from the 50s and 60s, and I remember a couple of decades later, when someone suggested that it was probably a good idea if we told our kids whether we did alcohol and drugs and all of that happy fun stuff, and I went, hell no. However, Rick, you sat down with your family, or some of your family. So how would you recommend someone do that?
Well, in my case, I was just honest with them. I told them, ironically, at first I decided to tell 400 strangers at a walk. And then when I was getting ready to do that, I figured, well, my kids might be there, so I need to talk to them. And so we started having that conversation, and they knew that. I didn't know they knew, but they knew I struggled with depression for a big part of my life, but they didn't know about the attempt. And so I shared the parts that were appropriate. I didn't go into any kind of detail about my attempt, but kind of what led up to it and the things that I had found helpful after the attempt to kind of get on that path to recovery, and the support systems I used. But I think the question Amber had is more of the attempt survivor talking to the loss survivor, if I understood correctly, right, Tracy?
What? Say that again, Rick?
I think Amber's question is more, is how do you start that conversation between the attempt survivor?
Right. Between it. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
And I had kind of answered, and she said about the honesty. I think the honesty is very important, but
Yes.
I kind of referred her back to you, Annemarie, because I know
Okay.
you have some. You make sure they go through some of the grief healing process before they interact, right? As
Right.
part of the program, you will make sure they're far enough in that their grief recovery and the attempt survivors somewhere in their recovery and before they interact intentionally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what happens at our grief support, we call it a kitchen table conversation, is it takes some time to feel someone out. And I'll give an example that there we had at one point we had someone come in, and the only way she could deal with her loss was anger. She was angry with everybody about everything. And there is absolutely no way I would encourage her or suggest to her at that point that she sit down at the re-energize and reconnect table with attempt survivors. It was a hard process. It took a long time for her to be okay enough to let go. And she said very openly, she said, if I let go of this anger, I'm going to fall apart. And I said, yep. And we're right here to catch you. So the grief support process is so important for loss survivors. I am a loss survivor. So I don't want people thinking I'm talking out of a book here. I'm talking from personal experience. Um, and that healing process, there's no timetable on that. Some people jump in, and that amazes me, jump in and become advocates like almost right out of the gate. And that is their way of dealing with the grief. And again, I'll fall back on Steve a bit. He was a year and a half, and he came through the door and said, I can I talk with you? And he was there to get some stuff, and he just needed to do something. So like so many who go to the out of darkness walks with AFSP, or the other walks that people might hold, that's oftentimes the first step that people take, is just to be around other loss survivors. My frustration is, so we're in Bristol County, Massachusetts here, Tracy and I. It's a county of 500,000 people, 20 cities and towns. In 2018, we lost we lost 86 people. Now, if you use Dr. Julie Searle's figures that have been accepted by everybody, that comes out to almost 12,000 lost survivors across the levels and the ripples. We have 3 kitchen table conversations in our region. Massachusetts is broken up into 10 suicide prevention regions. And we have 3 kitchen table conversations, and at best, we might have 7 people at the table. I've talked to people independent of that group. I've talked to people on the phone. Spent a lot of time this past week talking with fresh loss survivors who have said, "I'm just really not comfortable sitting around with a table of strangers." And then I've had others say, "I'm so grateful to find out that I can sit with people who do understand." Um, what I'm feeling and what I've experienced. And we've watched it every single time that we have put a lost survivor new with someone a little more seasoned, and they identified 2 14-year-old children lost, 2 dads that didn't know who else to talk to. It's incredible how that healing process can happen. The same with attempt survivors, Amber, because they need time to work through a lot of stuff, just like the lost survivors do. And what's interesting is it's a whole different path there, but the emotions are the same. It's raw, it's angry, wanting to lash out. And I'll talk about Tracy because she's right there. It took her almost 10 years after her last attempt before she finally said suicide is no longer an option, and she was consciously making a choice for life. So that was about the time that she heard Rosie speak. So you can talk about there are advantages and disadvantages to bringing them together sooner, but I don't think there's a black and white here. It's not. It's one or the other. There are too many shades to go. You have to start gently. You just have to start gently. But we also found out most loss survivors that we did end up encapsulating into all of our stuff, said that no one ever suggested to them that they listen to an attempt survivor, which I thought was odd. And likewise, there were so many attempt survivors who had never heard a lost survivor. And as Tracy has, she's become the champion for that. She really believes that it would save someone's life. Um, Trace, anything else on that?
Yeah, Jess asked, she says, how do we balance supporting people through being impacted by others' suicide crisis while maintaining the dignity of suicidal people and not falling into using fear, shame, etc. to control suicide people?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and Jess, that's why we have that whole exercise that control does not equal love. Tracy does some great public speaking on it because she'll give examples of how I behaved, which was not very nice. And in the name of love, when it's control, I don't have a formula that I can promise could work for anybody. And I think it's hard. And I think it goes deeper than that. I think this whole process for impacted family members, being able to treat the person with dignity and respect, is because we have not yet normalized this conversation. I trained 25 of 250 members of a police department Wednesday. I'm going to be there every Wednesday morning, and I double dared them. I said now as I close, I double dare you to, when you go, whoever you sit down at the dinner table with tonight or you talk to on the phone, you tell them what this workshop was all about. Well, you should have seen their faces. Like, oh, really? And I thought, if you can't normalize the conversation, who the hell can? We have to normalize that conversation. And Jess, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There is that lack of dignity and respect. And that's one of the things on the workshop that Tracy does for the Re-Energize and the Reconnect, is that it's about who's on that hit list. How about the emergency department doctor who ignored you once they found out what you were in there for, and treated you as less than human? And family members, I've heard it over and over again, do the same thing because they're so paralyzed with fear. They don't know what to do. So my war cry for the last couple of weeks has been, ever since I saw the Surgeon General's report and a couple of other things that came out, is that education is the Narcan for suicide. Everybody should, we're told over and over again that all of us should be carrying Narcan with us every day. So in case we need to help save someone's life. Well, education, the Narcan for suicide, is my next hashtag. Because if we can just get people to sit down with us for a half an hour even, then maybe they'll treat their loved ones with more respect. Rick, anything on that?
No, I think well said. Well said.
Yeah.
I was responding to tweets.
Yeah.
Trace, any other questions?
I haven't. Well, Marshall wants to bring it to Virginia, so I told him we could.
Easy done. Easy done. Road trips.
Easy done. We love
road trips. We love road trips. You cannot know how much we love road. We'll go anywhere. We're just, off we go.
We'll go anywhere.
Okay.
You call, we go.
So to Jess and to Amber, one of the things, and I have to, I can't begin to tell you all how funny I think it is that I'm sitting here right now, because when I first showed up at SPSM, the hashtag SPSM chat, I had no idea. I had never been on Twitter. So for all of you out there who are brand new, I have been there. I have been there. I didn't know how to get on and follow the chat. And I certainly couldn't keep up with the tweets, and I have to laugh I sat here earlier today and said, oh, wait a minute, I can't do my usual thing here, because I honestly, I can walk and chew gum. Okay. But I cannot be doing this and be tweeting away. So if April does it while she's doing that, I don't know how she's ever done it. Maybe after 6 years, someone can, I suppose you can do that. But I will go back and take a look at all of the tweets, and certainly answer them more fully. We put some resource links out. It's about quarter off. So by now, I hope you saw Rick's blog. I hope you saw the link to Tracy's book. I can't recommend that enough. And I don't mean that in the sense of ka-ching, ka-ching. We have given away hundreds of those books to school kids, to um, we've just given police forces, we've given them out and said, because it was written intentionally for anyone 13 and up. It's a conversational roller coaster ride of an attempt survivor going from trauma to resilience. And that's an important piece of this picture, is to be able to help kids hopefully talk about it. That's one of the biggest things that we talk about. So I will go back and do that, because there's no way I could possibly. I'm kind of annoyed that I can't see all the tweets going through, and that's why I keep calling people out in their names and saying, "I hope you're out there," because I haven't yet learned how to do the double screen up there so I can see the whole feed, and respond to you. Maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll feel that I can do that comfortably and not disconnect everybody. So listen, we're running down. We've got about 12 minutes left. Tracy, any other?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. So you had a couple of topic questions out there. One was, yeah, see, April saying, "Hey, dude, I get to watch it this time," and tweet.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yep. I
so
responded.
that,
Yep.
okay, so I'm just looking through the tweets. I mean, believe me, I could go on forever. With, yeah, I mean, I really could, to go on
Yes.
forever with this. But we're coming down. We're coming down to the last 10 minutes. So let me try to do a summary if I can. Oh, I know what I didn't mention. All right. Oh, I hope Colleen's not on the feed. So we have a new committee. It's the Impacted Family and Friends. So if you are an impacted member and you want to do something with this, if you really want to just get up and say, "I want to get more involved," we have a way for you to do that. Um, and usually I know that Tony is always saying, when he would introduce himself, that he was the chairperson of the board of directors for AAS, and always talk about the benefits of AAS membership. Trust me, you're not going to hear that every week. Don't worry about it. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that, and say thank you to AAS, that we do have a committee now, and this is a committee that already has probably 7 or 8 individual subcommittee task forces to be working on. But the results of the work that we had started and that AAS is adopting in a collaborative work with the Voice of the Table is, for those of you who are curious, there will be a sample toolkit um, available the end of the week, probably late on Thursday of this week, early Friday morning. And it has 3 sample exercises in it, and it has informal coaching videos where you get to listen to Tracy and I banter together about how to use those exercises. So, if nothing else, it will make someone laugh. And I'm always happy when we can do something to make people laugh with such a difficult subject. So, as we head down, because we're getting ready for final thoughts. So, Trace and Rick, I want you to think about that for a couple of minutes. In summary, there are millions. There are millions, and I really get frustrated with numbers, and I'm not a big data person. I apologize in the crew. I'm not a big data person, but when I look at these numbers,
Uh-oh. Did it freeze again? Are you still there?
I'm still here. I don't know if anybody can hear us.
I can't hear Annemarie. I think it froze on her end. Sorry, temporary setback. If anybody can hear us, I think Annemarie is still talking. I can hear her down the hall, but I can't hear her on the computer. I'm not sure if anybody, but we're almost winding down to the last 10 minutes. There. Better.
Do you want us to go ahead and do our final thoughts while we wait for her?
Yeah, why don't we? Because I'm not sure. It says I'm live here still, but so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and give my final thoughts. I'm so glad that we have SPSM back together again tonight and get to have some of those connections back. If some advice I'd give to those that have lived experience, I would encourage you to share it with family when you feel it's safe and appropriate. I believe it is a big factor in what helped save my son's life. I also think if you have lived experience, it's really important that you know who your supports are.
I know.
One of my closest supports is on SPSM tonight, Heather Williams. She was the very first person I ever told about my suicide attempt. An impacted family, it's time for us all to connect. We're stronger together. We can support each other, and we can change the culture. Those would be my final thoughts.
Oh, is that what you did?
Well, when you were gone, so we figured we'd try to keep going.
I was so gone. I was disconnected.
Very gone, yeah. So
Tracy,
I kind of took over.
Oh, good for you.
I did, yes. Something that's out of my norm. Everybody, I just want to let you know that I don't do that. I like to stay in the backfield and like just shout from the back, like kind of like. And but yeah, I am really. I'm excited. I was really excited about this. Doing this tonight. I know. I'm glad it's at 9 o'clock too, because I could never really stay up past 10 o'clock and do the 10 o'clock one, which always interfered with my work schedule. But I am just so grateful to be, a part of all of this. And, I'm grateful to April, for showing us the way and, and getting us to do this, which is like, I'm stoked about. So those are my final thoughts. I'm very excited. Very. I mean, I don't even know if I can sleep. I can't even sleep right now because like I'm so stoked. Yeah.
Well, that kind of doesn't matter. You're going to work.
Well, that's true. Right. Not tonight anyways.
Right. Okay, guys. So final thoughts for me. We got through it. And we had, so I've got some bandwidth issue going on here that I'll have to think about. We've done webinars before for 2 hours and not had that happen. So I'm not quite sure, where it came from. And, oh, all right. April's talking about some really cool stuff there. So anyway, first of all, thank you all for your patience with us. And I spent 12 years as a vocational teacher, and I know what it's like to walk into a classroom and have the entire student body say, well, that's not the way Lynn did it. And listen to that for months on end until I finally stood in front of the whole classroom and I said, can we get over this? Lynn's not here anymore. I'm what you've got. So let's make the most of it. Now, that is not my approach to you tonight. I hope we can grow into this so we can give April and Tony and Bart and Chris a little bit of a break because they did such incredible work over the last 6 years as they came together as a team. And I'm hoping that you'll find that Tracy and I and Rick and the others that we bring on board will leave you with that same sense of family, because I think that's one of the most important things about suicide prevention work is to recognize that we are a very unique family. And I'm sure every other health professional, public health professional protocol feels the same way, but there's something different. I have allergies, by the way, guys. year
I've asked
round.
her not to do that.
Yeah, and I know Tracy keeps saying, "Would you not do that when we're filming?" And I said, "Well, I can't help you out there." Um, but as we count down here, I hope we do develop that same sense of family. I hope that while we're talking about really serious topics, we can find the lighter side to this, because that's what helps keep me at least emotionally anchored. I am not perfect. I am not an expert. Um, I know my world. I'm comfortable with the place in my life that I'm in. And if I can do anything to help bring other people to that place, that's what I'll go and do. And this impacted family and friends. April came up this past spring to help the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention's Executive Committee Board of Directors go through a retreat, kind of a self inventory. We were all asked what our personal missions were, not what our agency's missions were. And mine was pretty simple. It's to be of service to others. And when I realized and started to stumble on more and more impacted family members who had nowhere to go, could find no resources. Many of the people who are on the AAS committee came to it and reached out to me because somehow, somewhere, somehow, with another person, they found out that we were doing this little project down in southeastern Massachusetts, and how could they do that too? And how could they? Because they had not found any resources, and that sucks. So I know that one of the questions or the tweets, the topics you got out there is, if you sincerely do, um, if you can sincerely do that, sincerely speak, Emery, um, and again, resources for suicide related impacted families. And that's super, super important. Um, oh, okay. Sorry. April really distracted me that time. Um, then, um, then please give them to us. I found a pamphlet in Australia, and the first half of it was about how to take care of your temp survivor, and the second half of it was about how to take care of yourself. And a short from that, I have not found anything. We have a ton of information now that we never had even 4 or 5 years ago for temp survivors and how to take care of them. And we have materials for loss survivors. But there's next to nothing out there for people like me. So we are a movement. This is going to grow, but we need to find ways to pull people out of the shadows. And so that's my spiel for tonight. Again, like Tracy and Rick, I cannot thank the hashtag SPSM chat founders and crew for being here with us tonight and keeping us moving forward. Um,
Absolutely.
because they rock, and as much as I moaned about being up on Sunday nights, I never regretted once being in this, and I learned so much. And I hope that's what we can bring to you over the next 6 months, that we can give you more, that we can help you find solutions. Because if we don't have them, then our responsibility will be go out and get them out. So everybody, that's a wrap. We are done. I
Yeah.
need to learn how to talk. I need to learn how to talk with April's accent.
Oh, wait a minute. I got to say one more thing to everybody out there in the world.
I know what you're going to do. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Go Patriots! Go Pats! We're coming to Kansas City.
Rick, do you have a response to that?
That's what they'll say. Missouri will take care of them.
Yeah, we'll see about that, baby. We'll see about that.
Okay, everybody. This is really a wrap. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks a million, peoples.